Natural selection. Is it enough to explain evolution? The modern synthesis has long been the central paradigm of biology, seeking to explain how evolution occurs. It takes Darwinian natural selection and combines it with Mendelian inheritance to try and explain how evolution occurs. It suggests that there are four mechanisms by which evolution can occur. This is a change in animal frequency. These are natural selection, genetic drift, mutations, and gene flow. The fact that there are four means that we can probably take our title question and mold it into, is the modern synthesis enough to explain evolution? Those who argue that it is not may argue for what is called the extended evolutionary synthesis. This suggests that the modern synthesis is too gene-centric and that it doesn't incorporate a whole range of processes that actually do influence evolution. These same processes are not simply outcomes of evolution, they are also causes. So what are some of the key differences in the core assumptions between the modern synthesis and the extended evolutionary synthesis? Well, this is a table of most of the key differences, but in this video we're only really going to concentrate on the first three rows. So there's the idea of the preeminence of natural selection, where natural selection pretty much alone is enough to explain why organisms appear to be highly adapted to their environments. This is opposed to reciprocal causation, where organisms are not only shaped by, but also shape their environments, and things like developmental bias and niche construction play roles. We'll talk about these in a bit more detail later. Do genes constitute the only means of inheritance, and are acquired characteristics non-heritable, or do we need to extend inheritance to include things like epigenetics? And lastly, in the modern synthesis, it is argued that there is no relationship between the direction in which mutations and thus phenotypic variation occurs and the trajectory that leads to enhanced fitness. This is opposed again to the extended evolutionary synthesis, where things like developmental bias can channel evolution in certain directions more regularly than others. So developmental bias is the idea that certain phenotypes are more likely to occur than others. It encompasses both drive and constraints, constraint being those that occur less frequently. For example, most mammals seem to be constrained to having 7 cervical vertebrae, whether or not they have really long or really short necks. The only two groups of mammals that seem to break this rule are the manatees and sloths. The reason why it is believed that evolution has this developmental constraint is that an aberrant number of neck vertebrae is associated with an increased risk of things like stillbirth and cancer, and therefore it's easy to see why evolution has been channeled potentially in a certain direction or restrained from going in others. What about niche construction? It is the idea that organisms not only adapt to pre-existing conditions, but that they can also actively modify their own and each other's evolutionary niches. This can be relocational, such as wildebeest moving in space to find more ideal conditions, or it can be perturbational, whereby things like beavers change their environment in a much more active way. There are some similarities with Richard Dawkins' concept of the extended phenotype, where Dawkins argues that the idea of the phenotype should extend beyond purely the biological processes that the genes result in, and should include things like behaviours such as nest building. But there are some differences between niche construction and the extended phenotype. For example, if you take the dam built by a beaver, the presence of the dam acts on multiple traits of the beaver, not just the genes that led to the construction of the dam in the first place. The presence of the dam alters how the beavers interact with each other, their ability to gain food, to gain water. Plus there is the fact that the longevity of the dam is greater than that of the beaver, so there is ecological inheritance between generations. This means that acquired characteristics or characters developed during the life of a single beaver can manifest and be expressed in the niche construction itself. And finally, we're going to talk about transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, where changes in gene expression can occur without changes in the DNA sequence. This can be a case of environmental stimuli triggering epigenetic marks such as DNA methylation, which lead to permanent changes in gene expression. What is very important is that these are heritable, as was shown with an experiment with mice, where a parent generation of mice was made to associate the smell of acetophenone with pain that was induced by shock treatment. Then the second and third generation of mice still showed increased sensitivity to the same odour, despite never actually being exposed to the same pain treatment. Now I hope that these three examples, and there are many more out there, may actually show that natural selection and a modern synthesis may not actually be enough to fully explain evolution.